One of the chapters that we look at later is the chapter on macros. Now we've just done advanced filtering, and advanced filtering is a perfect candidate for a macro. A macro is a series of actions that you want to perform, and you perform them on a regular basis. So if each week you can imagine you need to filter those records that match that criteria, you could speed up the process by turning it into a macro. So I want to use this example with a macro. Now first of all, if you're going to work with macros, you have to turn on the Developers tab, and it's a tab that appears in the ribbon. And I don't have the Developers tab on, so I'm going to show you how to do this. If you click on File and then you click on Options, you can go for, let me move it over, you can go for Customize Ribbon on the left hand side. When you click on Customize Ribbon and look to the right, if you've got Developer ticked, great. If you haven't, tick it, and then go OK. What you'll now have in your ribbon is an extra tab called Developers, and that'll be there every time you log into Excel now. Having set up the Developers tab, we now need to check the macro security level. So I'm going to click the button Macro Security. I need to ensure that Enable All Macros is chosen, so it doesn't disable my macros, and therefore I think they're not working. So I'll enable all macros and OK. The next thing I need to do is save this file as a macro-enabled workbook. At the moment it's an Excel workbook, which you can see up here is typically an XLSX file. I'm going to turn around and save this file as an XLSM file, which is a macro-enabled workbook. I like the shortcut key F12, it's a function key, and it brings up the Save As. So I brought up my Save As. I'm now going to save it as not an Excel workbook, but an Excel macro-enabled workbook, which is an XLSM. And I'm going to save it to my desktop, which is fine. I may actually rename it -1, so I've got a second copy of this file, and I'll go save. Now I'd like to record a macro. Now the macro I'd like to record is that each time I want to run an advanced filter, I want it to delete this last lot of data and rerun the advanced filter. So I'm going to record deleting this data here and rerunning the advanced filter. To record a macro, you have got a Record Macro button on your Developers tab, so I'm going to click that. I'm then going to give the macro a name. Now, like named ranges, you're not allowed spaces, so I'm just going to call it Crit1 Filter. I could assign a shortcut key, but I'll leave that for later, and I do want to store this macro in this workbook. I can optionally add a description. This macro will run an advanced filter using the list named target list and the criteria. Oops. Named Crit1. And OK. So now I want to record going to A7. I'm already in A7, but I want to record going there, so I click it. Everything you do is being recorded, so you must be very pedantic. I've clicked on A7. Now I want to press Control Asterisk, not Control A, because it gives you a completely different statement in your macro to Control Asterisk. So Control Asterisk is really the one you want to press. I'll press Control Asterisk to select the current region. I'll press the Delete key to get rid of that data, and then I'll click back in A7. I now want to record, excuse me, going to Advanced Filter. I want to copy to another location, and my list range is called Target List. My criteria is called Crit1, and I want to copy it to A7. So you just do your advanced filter as you normally would do, saying you want to copy those records from the target list that match Crit1 to the cell A7, and OK. And there's my answer there. If I wanted to tidy up my columns, I could do, so I can click above row 1, I can double the width, or just make it slightly wider, best fit the height, and then bring my columns back in again. And I'll then just adjust this one column. And I might click back in A7. Once I'm finished recording the actions I wanted to record, I'll hit the Stop Recording button on my Developers tab. So I've recorded my macro. Now what I want to do is make a nice button that I just click the button, it runs the macro. So we've made our macro, now let's make our button. If I go to the Insert tab in the ribbon, I have the option Shapes. And if I go to Shapes, I tend to use the shape called Beveled, which is a rectangle beveled, in the Basic Shapes group. So I'll click this particular shape and then I'll just drag and create a button. I'll then type and say Filter Regions, and I'll press Ctrl E, which is short for center. If I then click away from that button, the button doesn't do anything at this stage because it's just an object. Now what I do is I've created my macro, I've created my button, I connect the two together. If I right click my button, I can assign a macro. It gives me a list of the macros I've got, and I've only got the one in this file, so I choose Create One Filter, and I go OK. I'll now click away from the button, and the idea now is I can just click the button and it will run my macro and filter out those records that match this criteria. And there it is, it's done it. Now it's not easy to see if it's actually worked unless I change my criteria. So let's just change this. Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, and Hamilton. And I'll click my button. And as you can see here, these records are from Auckland, Hamilton, Wellington, and Christchurch. So what you could do is you could zhuzh up the look of this area here, and you can make it that the person who's using the spreadsheet just simply has to go into this area and fill in the orange cells with the regions that they want and click this button. For example, I might decide I just want Hamilton, in which case I'll type Hamilton, but I have to fill all of these cells with Hamilton because they must all be filled in. But when I click the button, there are the records just from Hamilton. So it's a perfect candidate for a macro.